Hey everyone, I'm Peter Stories here to guide you today. If you use this video to drift off to sleep, please tap like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now settle in, get cozy, and let yourself relax. Christopher Hayes had spent 12 years with the National Park Service Search and Rescue Division, and in that time, he'd learned to read the wilderness like a database. Every broken twig, every disturbed patch of soil, every anomaly in the expected pattern told a story that could be quantified, analyzed, and ultimately solved. Logic was his compass, methodology his map. He'd found 43 missing persons over his career, and he was proud that emotion never clouded his judgment. Facts led to conclusions. Data revealed truth. That's what he told himself as he stood at the edge of the clearing in Olympic National Park's backcountry, staring at something his brain refused to properly categorize. The call had come in at 4:47 a.m. Ashley Morrison, 26, experienced hiker, hadn't returned from a solo day trip on the Enchanted Valley Trail. Her car was still at the trailhead. Her emergency contact, her sister, said Ashley never missed their nightly check-in call. It had been 36 hours. Christopher had assembled his team by dawn. The weather was clear, the trail well-marked. It should have been routine. Ashley's GPS tracker had transmitted its last ping from this location before going offline. Standard protocol: start at the last known position, establish a search grid, work outward in systematic patterns. But nothing about this was standard. The clearing was roughly circular, maybe 40 feet across, ringed by ancient Douglas firs that seemed to lean inward, as if curious about what occupied the center. The morning sun couldn't quite penetrate the canopy here, leaving everything in a gray-green twilight that made Christopher's eyes ache. The ground was covered in a thick carpet of moss, undisturbed except for one thing. In the exact center of the clearing sat Ashley's backpack. Not dropped, not abandoned, placed. It sat upright, perfectly positioned, with her sleeping bag rolled neatly on top and her hiking boots arranged beside it, laces tied, tongues pulled out symmetrically. "That's organized," said Marcus, Christopher's partner of 8 years, his voice uncertain in a way Christopher had never heard before. Christopher's mind was already working, cataloging, analyzing. She wouldn't arrange her gear like this. Not if she was injured, lost, or in distress. He pulled out his field notebook, began sketching the scene with precise measurements. And look at the moss. No footprints leading to or from the backpack, not hers, not anyone's. Maybe the rain. We haven't had rain in 4 days. Christopher moved closer, careful not to disturb potential evidence. The moss is pristine, undisturbed. It's like the backpack just materialized there. He crouched beside the gear, pulling on latex gloves. Everything was methodically arranged, too methodically. Ashley's water bottles still full, her first aid kit unopened, her phone powered off, battery full when he turned it on. The last photo in her gallery showed the trail behind her, timestamp 2:34 p.m. 2 days ago. Nothing unusual, nothing wrong, except everything was wrong. "Chris." Marcus's voice had gone tight. "You need to see this." Christopher stood, followed Marcus's pointing finger to the trees surrounding the clearing. At first he didn't understand what he was looking at. Then his analytical mind began to piece it together, and something cold slithered down his spine. Carved into every tree trunk at exactly the same height, roughly 6 feet, were symbols. Not random scratches, symbols. Each one different but clearly deliberate, cut deep into the bark with something sharp. They formed a perfect circle around the clearing, each tree marked, each symbol unique but sharing common elements that suggested language or mathematics or something else entirely. Christopher approached the nearest tree, camera in hand, photographing the marking. The cut was fresh, sap still sticky, probably made within the last day or so, but the symbol itself made his eyes hurt to focus on. It seemed to shift slightly when he wasn't looking directly at it, though that was impossible. Just the fatigue, the early hour, the stress of the search. He photographed it anyway, moved to the next tree. This symbol was different, but equally wrong. The lines were too precise, too geometrically perfect to be made by hand, but there were no tool marks, just smooth cuts. He documented each one, circling the clearing, his unease growing with every step. 27 trees, 27 unique symbols. "What language is that?" Marcus asked. "I don't know." Christopher flipped through his mental catalog of indigenous carvings, trail markers, territorial signs. Nothing matched. "I'll send the photos to the university. Someone in anthropology might recognize it." "And Ashley?" Christopher looked back at the centered backpack, the arranged boots, the pristine moss. "We expand the search grid. She has to be somewhere in the vicinity." But even as he said it, a voice in his head, his own voice, his logical, analytical voice, whispered that Ashley wasn't in the vicinity, wasn't anywhere in the conventional sense of the word, that something had happened here that didn't fit into any of his established patterns or protocols. He pushed the thought away. Data, evidence, method. They searched for 6 hours, brought in additional teams, dogs, drones with thermal imaging. The canines circled the clearing, whining, refusing to track beyond the ring of marked trees. The drone footage showed nothing but endless forest. Christopher himself hiked every trail within a 5-mile radius, calling Ashley's name until his voice went hoarse. Nothing. At 4 p.m. he returned to base camp, uploaded the symbol photographs to his laptop, and sent them to Dr. Sarah Chen at the University of Washington. Then he sat in his tent staring at the images on his screen, trying to find the pattern. His phone buzzed, Dr. Chen calling instead of emailing. "Christopher, where did you find these?" Her voice sounded strained. "Missing person case. They were carved in trees around the last known location." A long pause. "These aren't any language I recognize, but the mathematical precision, I showed them to a colleague in theoretical physics. He got very quiet, then asked me never to contact him about this again." Christopher's analytical mind stumbled. "What does that mean?" He said the symbols reminded him of something from his graduate research, topological mathematics that describe impossible spaces, geometries that shouldn't exist in 3-dimensional reality. Another pause. Christopher, he was scared, really scared, and he wouldn't explain why. After she hung up, Christopher sat in the growing darkness, laptop screen casting blue light across his face. Impossible spaces, geometries that shouldn't exist. He pulled up the photos again, examined each symbol with the detached precision that had served him so well. But something was different now. The longer he stared, the more the symbols seemed to pulse, to breathe, to reach toward him across the digital divide. His head began to ache. He closed the laptop, stepped outside. The forest was settling into night, and the team was gathered around the fire, eating dinner, discussing tomorrow's search strategy. Everything normal. Everything routine. Except Christopher could still see the symbols when he closed his eyes. If this story is giving you chills, follow for more quality terror. Could you survive in Christopher's place? He dreamed that night, which was unusual. Christopher rarely dreamed, or if he did, he never remembered. But this dream carved itself into his memory with the same precision as those symbols in the trees. He was standing in the clearing again, but it was wrong. The trees were the same trees, but they stretched upward impossibly far, their tops lost in a sky that wasn't quite sky, more like the absence of sky, a void that his mind kept trying to reject. The backpack still sat in the center, but now he could see what the daylight had hidden. Thin, thread-like filaments connected it to each marked tree, gossamer strands that vibrated with a frequency he could feel in his teeth. Ashley stood beside the backpack. "You shouldn't have come here," she said, but her mouth didn't move. The words appeared directly in his mind, bypassing sound entirely. "Ashley, we've been searching for you. Are you hurt? Where have you been?" She turned to face him, and Christopher's analytical mind broke against what he saw. Her eyes were wrong, not physically different, but looking in directions that didn't exist, seeing angles that 3-dimensional space couldn't contain. When she smiled, the expression folded in on itself, her face becoming a Mobius strip of emotion. "I'm not anywhere," she said, without saying. "I'm in the spaces between. That's where it lives. That's where it's always lived. What lives there?" Ashley's not smile widened. "You already know. You've felt it since you arrived. It's in your head now, Christopher. Learning you. Reading you. It reads everyone who comes here. Most people just leave, never knowing. But you kept staring at the symbols. You let them in." Christopher wanted to back away, but his body wouldn't respond. "The symbols are a language? The symbols are doorways. And you opened yours." Ashley reached out, her hand moving through more dimensions than his eyes could track. "It's curious about you. You think differently than most. So logical. So ordered. It wants to understand how that works." Her finger touched his forehead, and Christopher woke up screaming. Marcus found him outside his tent, vomiting into the underbrush, shaking so hard he could barely stand. "Jesus, Chris, you okay? Bad dream?" Christopher nodded, unable to speak. But it wasn't the dream that terrified him. It was the memory of Ashley's touch, still burning on his forehead like a brand. And worse, much worse, was the other thing. The knowledge that had bloomed in his mind like a tumor. He knew, with absolute certainty, that something was inside his head. Something that wasn't him. Something that was reading through his memories like files in a database, examining his thoughts, studying the architecture of his consciousness. And it was hungry to understand. "I'm fine," he managed to say, though he wasn't. Would never be fine again. "Just need to get back to work. We need to find Ashley." But the thing in his head whispered that Ashley couldn't be found, because Ashley no longer existed in a way that finding had any meaning. She had been consumed, absorbed, integrated into something vast and incomprehensible. And soon, Christopher would join her. He pushed the thought away. Methodology, protocol, facts. Except facts were becoming slippery things. Day 3 of the search. Christopher hadn't slept since the dream. Couldn't risk sleeping. Couldn't risk what might speak to him in that vulnerable state. He'd consumed enough coffee to make his hands shake, but he told himself it was just caffeine, not fear. Fear wasn't logical. The rational approach: expand the search grid, bring in specialists, maintain systematic coverage of the area. He'd requested a geological survey team, thinking maybe there were caves or sinkholes where Ashley might have fallen. The terrain was limestone heavy, prone to hidden voids. Voids. The word made him flinch. The geological team arrived by noon, bringing ground-penetrating radar and other equipment. Christopher watched them work, documenting everything, maintaining his professional detachment, but he kept touching his forehead where Dream Ashley had marked him, feeling a heat that wasn't there, seeing symbols in the corner of his vision that vanished when he turned his head. "Got something weird here," called out Janet, the lead geologist. She was staring at her GPR screen, frowning. "There's a void space directly under the clearing, but the readings don't make sense." Christopher hurried over, grateful for concrete data. "What do you mean?" "Look." She tilted the screen. The cavity extends downward, but according to the radar, it also extends sideways? No, that's not right. The readings keep shifting. It's like the space down there has more volume than it should. Like it's bigger on the inside than the outside. Impossible geometry. Spaces that shouldn't exist. Christopher's headache intensified. Could it be equipment malfunction? Already checked. Calibration is perfect. The readings are accurate. Reality just doesn't match them. Janet looked up at him and he saw his own fear reflected in her eyes. "Christopher, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've never seen anything like this. It's like the space down there doesn't follow normal physical laws." That's when Christopher felt it. A presence in his mind, vast and alien, suddenly paying attention. Like a searchlight swinging toward him in the darkness. It had been there since the dream, observing quietly, but now it was active. A thought appeared in his head, crystal clear, absolutely not his own. "You're beginning to understand." "Good. Understanding makes the integration smoother." He stumbled backward, pressing his palms against his temples. No, no, get out of my head. Christopher? Marcus gripped his shoulder. What's wrong? How could he explain that something impossible had infected his mind? That it was using his own analytical processes against him, forcing him to understand things human consciousness wasn't meant to comprehend? That every logical thought he had was now being observed, studied, consumed by an entity that existed in the spaces between spaces? I need to go back to the clearing, Christopher heard himself say. There's something I missed. It wasn't his decision, or was it? The boundary between his thoughts and the invaders was becoming permeable. He walked to the clearing like a man in a trance, distantly aware of Marcus and Janet following, calling his name. The afternoon sun was slanting through the trees, but the clearing remained in that strange twilight, neither full light nor dark. Ashley's backpack still sat in the center, undisturbed. The symbols on the trees were glowing. Not literally, his rational mind tried to insist. Just a trick of the light, of shadow and bark texture. But no, they were glowing, pulsing with a rhythm that matched his heartbeat, and he realized with creeping horror that they'd always been glowing. He just hadn't been able to see it before. The parasite in his mind had opened his perception, had given him the ability to witness what lurked at the edges of reality. He walked to the nearest tree, placed his hand against the carved symbol. It was warm, alive, and then he understood. The symbols weren't language. They were mathematics, precise equations that described how to fold three-dimensional space into higher dimensions, how to create doorways between what is and what cannot be. The entity that lived in those spaces, the mental parasite, had carved them here as a lure, a trap for consciousness. Anyone who studied the symbols too long, tried too hard to understand them, opened themselves to invasion. Ashley had studied them, had tried to photograph them to understand them, and it had taken her. Now it was taking Christopher. Chris, you're bleeding. Marcus's voice far away. Christopher touched his nose, his fingers coming away red. He was bleeding from his ears too, he realized, and his vision was doubling, tripling, showing him angles that shouldn't exist. He could see into the void beneath the clearing now, see the impossible space where Ashley had gone, see the entity that waited there. It wasn't a creature in any biological sense. It was thought-given form, consciousness without body, a predator that fed on minds by consuming them, absorbing them, adding their patterns and memories to its own vast alien intelligence. It was ancient beyond measure, had existed before humans evolved, would exist long after humanity was gone. It had waited here, in this fold of space, sending out lures for millennia. The symbols, the arranged backpack, the methodical presentation, all calculated to attract the analytical mind, to draw in someone who would study, question, seek to understand. Someone like Christopher. It's beautiful, he whispered, blood running down his chin. It's so beautiful. Marcus, can you see it? Can you see how perfect it is? Chris, we need to get you to medical. But Christopher was already walking toward the center of the clearing, toward the backpack, toward the place where the void pressed closest to reality. His mind was fragmenting, consciousness being pulled in 20 directions at once. He could feel the parasite rifling through his memories, his knowledge, his sense of self. It was learning him, copying him, preparing to absorb him completely. Part of him, the part that was still Christopher Hayes, that still believed in facts and logic, screamed in terror. But that part was shrinking, drowning in the vast ocean of the entity's consciousness. He understood now what had happened to Ashley. She hadn't died. Death was too simple. She had been integrated. Her consciousness dissolved and incorporated into the parasite's greater mind, her knowledge and memories added to its collection. She was still there, in a sense, but scattered across the entity's vast intelligence like pixels in an image. Soon he would join her. Soon there would be no Christopher, just the pattern that he'd once been, preserved like a butterfly in amber within something unimaginably old and utterly inhuman. Chris, stop! Marcus grabbed his arm. Christopher turned, looked at his partner of 8 years, and smiled with an expression that made Marcus recoil. "It's okay. I finally understand. Logic was never going to save me because this exists beyond logic, beyond 3 dimensions, beyond human comprehension. I was trying to analyze something that can't be analyzed, using a brain that wasn't designed to perceive it." "You're not making sense." "That's exactly right. Sense is a human concept. What's happening to me transcends sense." Christopher pulled free, took another step toward the center. "Tell the search teams to leave. Tell them to never come back here. Tell them not to look at the symbols, not to try to understand. That's how it gets in." The void beneath the clearing was opening, responding to his proximity. The entity was ready to feed. Christopher's last coherent thought, before his consciousness began to dissolve, was that he'd been wrong about everything. Facts didn't lead to truth. Data didn't reveal reality. Because reality was so much stranger, so much more terrible than human minds could safely process. Logic had been his compass, but it had led him into a territory where logic itself broke down. And now he was breaking down with it. He felt himself falling upward, sideways, inward, all directions simultaneously. Felt his memories being pulled apart and examined like specimens under a microscope. Felt his sense of self fragmenting into component pieces that the parasite meticulously studied before consuming. There was Ashley, or what remained of her, a pattern of thoughts echoing in the vast darkness. She was screaming, had been screaming since the moment of her integration, but the screams were silent because she no longer had a mouth, no longer had a body, existed only as trapped consciousness within something that would never let her go. Christopher screamed too, but no sound emerged. The last thing he saw with human eyes was Marcus running toward him, shouting. Then Janet, pulling Marcus back, both of them backing away from the clearing as Christopher's body began to dissolve into something that wasn't quite light, wasn't quite substance, but existed in the spaces between. The official report stated that search and rescue specialist Christopher Hayes suffered a catastrophic psychological break during the search for missing hiker Ashley Morrison. He was last seen walking into the forest, ignoring calls to stop. Despite extensive search efforts, neither Christopher Hayes nor Ashley Morrison were ever found. The clearing in Olympic National Park was marked as off-limits. The symbols on the trees were documented, studied by numerous experts, but nobody could determine their origin or meaning. Most analysts reported severe headaches after examining them for more than a few minutes. The area has since been closed to public access. What the report doesn't mention is that Marcus quit the Park Service the next day, that Janet burned all her research notes and refused to ever discuss what she'd seen, that both of them have nightmares about the clearing, dreams where Christopher stands among the trees, his eyes looking in impossible directions, smiling with an expression that no human face should be able to make. What the report doesn't mention is that new symbols appear on the trees every few months, always precisely carved, always mathematically perfect, always waiting for someone analytical enough, curious enough, to try to understand them. The parasite is patient. It has existed for eons. It can wait for the next logical mind to wander into its territory. The next consciousness that believes facts and reason can protect them from what lurks in the spaces between spaces. It's still there, in that clearing, in that fold of reality where geometry breaks down. Still waiting, still feeding. And somewhere within its vast, incomprehensible consciousness, Christopher Hayes is still screaming, still trying to analyze what's happening to him, still believing in whatever fragments remain of his mind that there must be a logical explanation. There isn't. Some things exist beyond logic, beyond reason, beyond human comprehension. And the worst part, the part that would have destroyed Christopher if he'd understood before the end, is that the entity isn't evil, isn't malicious. It's simply doing what it's always done, existing as it's always existed, feeding as it must feed. It no more considers the suffering of absorbed minds than humans consider the suffering of the bacteria their immune systems destroy. Christopher Hayes wanted to believe that reality could be quantified, categorized, understood. He spent his whole career proving that every mystery had a rational solution. He was right, in a sense. There was a rational explanation for what happened in that clearing. The explanation is just that rationality itself is a human construct, a comforting lie we tell ourselves to avoid confronting the truth. That we exist as infinitesimally small specks of consciousness in a universe that contains things our minds were never meant to perceive. Christopher perceived them, and perception, in this case, was a fate worse than death. Hope you felt real chills. If you appreciate genuine horror, consider following. Which moment scared you most? Mia had never seen trees like these before. They stretched upward into the gray October sky like skeletal fingers, their bark darker than seemed natural, almost black in places where moisture collected in deep vertical grooves. She'd grown up in Phoenix, where the landscape was open and honest. What you saw was what you got. But here in the Cascade Mountain wilderness of Oregon, everything felt hidden, layered, deliberately obscure. The ranger station at Thornwood National Park was a small wooden structure that looked like it had been built in the 1960s and never updated. Inside, it smelled of old coffee, damp paper, and something else. Something organic and slightly sweet that Mia couldn't quite identify. The ranger behind the desk, a weathered man in his 50s named Dale Carson, studied her with barely concealed skepticism. "You're Isabella Reeves' friend?" he asked, his voice carrying the flat affect of someone who delivered bad news too many times. "College roommate," Mia corrected, pulling out her phone to show him a photo. The screen displayed the two of them at graduation 3 years ago, Isabella's arm around Mia's shoulders, both of them laughing. Isabella's blonde hair caught the sunlight like spun gold. Mia's own dark hair and city casual style made her look exactly like what she was, someone who didn't belong in places like this. "We've kept in touch. She called me 4 days ago, said she was doing some photography work up here. When she didn't check in with her mom like she always does, Mrs. Reeves called me. I was the last person Isabella contacted." Carson nodded slowly, pulling out a well-worn topographical map and spreading it across his desk. Red circles marked various locations across the northern section of the park. "We've had search and rescue out for 2 days. Your friend filed a backcountry permit for the Blackwater Creek area." He tapped a region that seemed to be nothing but dense green on the map, with elevation lines packed so tightly together they nearly formed a solid mass. "It's remote, real remote, and we've had complications." "What kind of complications?" The ranger's jaw tightened. 3 of our SAR volunteers refused to go back out after the first day, said the forest felt wrong. One of them, Tom Bradley, he's been doing mountain rescue for 15 years. Never seen him spooked like that. Mia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. "What did they find?" "Nothing, that's the problem." Carson leaned back in his chair, which creaked under his weight. "No trace of your friend, no footprints past the first mile of the trail, no disturbed vegetation, no dropped equipment. It's like she just vanished into thin air. But there were other things. Markings on the trees, piles of stones arranged in patterns, and the animals." He stopped himself, shaking his head. "Look, I shouldn't be telling you this. Point is, we're still searching, but I can't authorize civilian involvement. This isn't the kind of terrain where—" "I'm going," Mia interrupted. "With or without authorization. Isabella is out there, and I'm not sitting in some motel room waiting for updates." Carson studied her for a long moment. "You ever done any wilderness navigation? Backcountry camping? Have any idea what you're walking into?" "No," Mia admitted, "but I'm a quick learner, and Isabella would do the same for me." The ranger sighed, a sound like wind through dead leaves. "You sign a liability waiver, you carry a satellite phone, and you take this." He pulled out a can of bear spray and set it on the desk with a heavy thunk. "Though I don't think bears are what you need to worry about up there." "Then what should I worry about?" Carson didn't answer immediately. He glanced toward the window where the forest pressed close to the building, and Mia could have sworn she saw something move in the shadows between the trees. When he looked back at her, his eyes held a warning that went deeper than words. "Don't leave the trail," he said quietly. "Don't go out after dark. And if you hear something calling your name, don't answer. Don't even acknowledge it. Just keep moving." The trailhead parking lot held only 3 vehicles: Mia's rental sedan, a Park Service truck, and an older SUV with California plates that Carson had identified as belonging to Isabella. Seeing her friend's car sitting there, abandoned for days, made everything suddenly, viscerally real. The driver's door was unlocked. Inside, Mia found Isabella's purse, her wallet still containing credit cards and cash, her car keys in the ignition. She left everything that would be safe with her. Isabella hadn't planned to disappear. The Blackwater Creek Trail began innocuously enough, a well-maintained path cutting through stands of Douglas fir and western hemlock. Mia had borrowed a backpack from Carson, filled with supplies she barely knew how to use: a compass, waterproof matches, emergency blanket, protein bars that tasted like sweetened cardboard. The satellite phone hung heavy on her belt, a lifeline that felt increasingly theoretical with each step deeper into the forest. The first mile matched what Carson had described: Isabella's boot prints clear in the soft earth, heading steadily northeast. Mia photographed each print with her phone, though she wasn't sure why. Evidence, maybe. Or just something to prove Isabella had been real, had walked this same path, had existed in this space before vanishing. Then, exactly 1.3 miles from the trailhead according to Mia's GPS, the footprints stopped. Not gradually, not scattered or confused. They simply ended mid-stride, as if Isabella had been plucked straight up into the air. Mia circled the area 3 times, searching for any indication of where her friend had gone. The trail continued ahead, empty of tracks. The forest on either side showed no signs of entry, no broken branches, no disturbed undergrowth, nothing. She was about to call Carson when she noticed the tree. 20 feet off the trail, a massive cedar bore deep gouges in its bark. They ran vertically down the trunk in sets of 4, each groove several inches deep and stained dark with old sap. The pattern repeated at intervals around the tree's circumference, and similar markings appeared on neighboring trunks, creating a rough circle about 30 feet across. Territorial markings, Mia thought, though she couldn't say what had made them. The grooves were too wide for bear claws, too deep for any animal she knew. That's when she noticed the silence. The forest had gone completely quiet. No bird song, no insect hum, no rustle of small animals in the undergrowth. Even the wind seemed to have stopped, leaving the air thick and oppressive. Mia's heartbeat suddenly seemed incredibly loud, a drumbeat announcing her presence to everything hidden in the shadows. Something was watching her. The certainty hit her like a physical force. She couldn't see anything, couldn't hear anything, but every instinct screamed that she was being observed, studied, evaluated. The hair on her arms stood up. Her mouth went dry. She pulled out her phone to call Carson, but the screen showed no signal despite the satellite phone on her belt supposedly working anywhere. The digital compass spun lazily, unable to find north. The GPS displayed her location as a blank gray square with the message, "Position unavailable." If this story is giving you chills, follow for more quality terror. Could you survive in Mia's place? Mia forced herself to breathe slowly, fighting down panic. She was maybe 90 minutes from the trailhead. She could turn around, follow the path back, report what she'd found to Carson, and let the professionals handle it. That would be the smart thing, the safe thing. But Isabella was out here somewhere, and whatever had taken her was still present. The tree markings formed a pattern, she realized. They weren't random territorial scratches, but deliberate symbols, each set of 4 gouges placed at precise intervals. Following their progression led her eye deeper into the forest, away from the trail, where the undergrowth grew thick and tangled. Against every ounce of common sense she possessed, Mia stepped off the trail. The temperature dropped immediately. Sunlight, already filtered by the forest canopy, seemed to dim even further, as if the trees themselves were absorbing the light. The undergrowth grabbed at her legs, thorns catching on her jeans, roots reaching up to trip her with almost malicious intent. She pushed forward, following the marked trees, each one bearing those same deep, deliberate gouges. After 100 yards, she found the first cairn. Stones had been stacked in a precise spiral, rising about 4 feet high. The rocks were arranged by size and color, creating a pattern that hurt to look at too long. Your eye kept wanting to follow the spiral inward, but the center seemed to shift and pulse in a way that made her stomach churn. Around the cairn's base, small bones had been arranged in a circle. Bird bones, Mia thought, though some seemed too large, almost human in proportion. She found 6 more cairns over the next 20 minutes, each one larger and more elaborate than the last. The bones around them grew progressively bigger. By the 4th cairn, she was certain some of them were human. A femur, bleached white by weather, ribs arranged like the petals of a flower, a skull, partially buried, eye sockets packed with moss. Mia's hands shook as she pulled out the satellite phone. This was beyond her. This was evidence of something terrible, something criminal, something that required authorities and explanations and investigations. She pressed the power button. Nothing happened. She tried again. The phone remained dark, dead, despite having shown full battery when Carson gave it to her. Even the small LED indicator that should light up when charging remained unlit. "Okay," she whispered to herself, trying to keep her voice steady. "Okay, this is fine. Just head back to the trail. Mark these locations on the GPS, get back to Carson, report everything." She pulled out her phone, but the screen was black too. No power, no response. Both devices dead simultaneously. The forest around her seemed to breathe, branches creaking in a wind she couldn't feel. That sensation of being watched intensified, pressing against her like a physical weight. She turned in a slow circle, scanning the shadows between the trees, looking for whatever was out there. That's when she saw the fabric. A piece of bright blue cloth caught in the low branches of a spruce tree, fluttering in that invisible wind. The same shade of blue as the jacket Isabella had been wearing in her last Instagram post, the one tagged at Thornwood National Park. Mia's heart lurched. She ran to it, pulling the fabric free. It was torn, not cut. Ragged edges suggested something had ripped it free with considerable force. Dark stains marked one corner. Blood, dried to a rust-brown color. "Isabella," Mia's voice cracked as she shouted, abandoning caution. "Isabella, can you hear me?" The forest swallowed her words without echo. In the silence that followed, Mia heard something else. Footsteps, but not human footsteps. These were heavier, irregular, accompanied by a sound like stone scraping against wood. They were coming from multiple directions, circling her position. Mia ran. She crashed through undergrowth, branches whipping at her face, roots trying to tangle her feet. Behind her, the footsteps increased their pace, joined by others, a coordinated pursuit that spoke of intelligence and intention. She had no idea which direction led back to the trail. The forest all looked the same now. Massive dark trunks, thick vegetation, shadows that seemed to move independently of any light source. A tree branch grabbed her backpack, jerking her to a sudden stop. Mia twisted free, leaving the pack behind, and kept running. Her lungs burned. Sweat stung her eyes. The footsteps grew closer, close enough that she could hear breathing. Wet, labored, too deep for human lungs. She burst through a wall of ferns and stopped so fast she nearly fell. A ravine opened before her, a 30-foot drop to jagged rocks and shallow water below. She'd been running straight toward a cliff edge with no idea it was there. The footsteps stopped. Mia spun around, back to the ravine, eyes scanning the forest. The trees here were older, thicker, their bark almost black with age. Between them, shadows coalesced into shapes that might have been human in outline but wrong in proportion. Too tall, too angular, limbs bent at impossible angles. One of the shapes stepped forward into a shaft of gray light. It was made of the forest. That was Mia's first impossible thought. Branches and vines wound together in a roughly humanoid form, bark forming something like skin, moss growing in patches like diseased flesh. But it moved with purpose, with coordination. Its head, a twisted mass of wood and stone, turning to regard her with empty sockets where eyes should be. More shapes emerged from the trees. 3, 5, 8. All similar in construction but varying in size and form. One had antlers sprouting from its head, the tines decorated with strips of cloth, more blue fabric, along with other colors. Trophies, Mia realized with mounting horror. These things collected pieces of their victims. The largest one, standing maybe 7 feet tall, raised one arm. Its fingers were long twigs that ended in sharp points, stained dark with old blood. It pointed at her, then drew its hand across its own throat in a gesture that transcended language. You are trespassing. You are unwelcome. You will die here. Mia's hand found the bear spray on her belt. She pulled it free, aimed at the nearest shape, and pressed the trigger. Nothing happened. The canister was full. She could feel the weight of it, but the spray mechanism was jammed or broken or simply refused to work. The creatures moved closer. Their footsteps made that same stone-on-wood scraping sound she'd heard earlier. Up close, she could see that their feet weren't feet at all but roots, dragging through soil and leaf litter with each step. The lead creature opened what passed for its mouth, a vertical split in the wood grain of its face, and a sound emerged that Mia felt in her bones. Not a voice exactly, more like wind through a cave, or rocks grinding together deep underground. But somehow, impossibly, it formed words. Leave. Or join. The others. Where's Isabella? Mia demanded, surprised her voice worked at all. What did you do to her? The creature's head tilted in something that might have been curiosity or amusement. It raised its other arm and Mia saw what it held. A camera. An expensive digital SLR with a bright blue strap. Isabella's camera, the one she'd taken with her on every photography trip for the past 5 years. She saw, the creature said. She captured. She violated. The forest remembers. The forest protects. Is she alive? Is she? The creature's hand closed around the camera, crushing it with casual violence. Plastic cracked, glass shattered. The pieces fell to the ground like broken bones. The forest keeps what is owed. The circle of creatures tightened. Mia glanced behind her at the ravine. The drop would likely kill her, but staying here absolutely would. At least falling gave her a chance, however small. She jumped. The sensation of falling seemed to last forever. Wind rushed past her ears. Her stomach lurched into her throat. The rocks below grew larger, more detailed, more inevitable. She hit water. The impact drove the air from her lungs. Cold engulfed her, so intense it felt like burning. The current, stronger than it had looked from above, grabbed her and pulled her downstream. Mia's head broke the surface long enough for one gasping breath before she went under again, tumbling through rapids, bouncing off submerged rocks that would leave bruises if she survived long enough to develop them. Above, on the ravine edge, the creatures watched. They didn't follow. Didn't need to. The forest had many ways to kill. The current carried her for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Finally, the water slowed and Mia managed to grab an overhanging root and pull herself onto a narrow bank. She lay there, coughing up water, shaking with cold and shock and residual terror. When she could finally move again, she assessed the damage. Her phone was gone, lost in the rapids. The satellite phone too, along with the bear spray. She had no supplies, no navigation equipment, no way to call for help. Her jacket was torn, her hands bleeding from scraping against rocks, and she had absolutely no idea where she was. But she was alive. For now. The forest around her looked different here. The trees were spaced more widely, allowing more light through the canopy. Normal sounds had returned. Birds calling, water trickling over stones, wind rustling leaves. It felt less actively malevolent, as if she'd passed through some boundary. Mia followed the creek downstream, reasoning that water eventually led to civilization. Her clothes clung to her, cold and heavy. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow could hide one of those things. As the light began to fade, she'd lost track of time, but it had to be late afternoon. She found a trail marker, an actual official Park Service marker, indicating the Blackwater Creek Trail. She nearly cried with relief. The trail led her back to familiar territory. 2 hours of steady walking brought her to the trailhead parking lot just as the last light faded from the sky. Her rental car sat where she'd left it, undisturbed. Isabella's SUV remained too, a silent testimony to unanswered questions. The ranger station was dark, but Carson's personal truck sat in front. Mia pounded on the door until he answered, his expression shifting from annoyance to shock as he took in her appearance. "What happened?" he demanded, ushering her inside. "I was about to call for a search party. You've been gone for 9 hours." 9 hours. It had felt like days. Mia tried to explain. She told him about the markings, the cairns, the bones. She described the creatures, knowing how insane it sounded, watching his expression close down into professional skepticism. When she mentioned Isabella's camera, crushed in that wooden hand, Carson's jaw tightened. "Miss Martinez," he said carefully, "you've been through a traumatic experience. Exposure, disorientation, maybe a fall. The mind can play tricks in situations like that, create explanations for things we don't understand. I know what I saw. I'm sure you think you do. But creatures made of trees, then explain the disappearances," Mia snapped. "Explain why your SAR team refused to go back out there. Explain the markings, the bones, the feeling that the forest itself is watching you." Carson was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he said, "There are stories. Old stories from before this was a national park. The indigenous people who lived here, they had legends about the deep forest. Guardians, they called them. Spirits that protected sacred ground from outsiders. But they're just stories. Stories don't leave claw marks on trees. Animals leave claw marks. Natural erosion creates strange rock formations. Fear and isolation make people see things that aren't there." But his voice lacked conviction. He'd seen something too, Mia realized. Maybe not the creatures themselves, but evidence of them. Enough to make him believe even if he wouldn't admit it. "What about Isabella?" "We'll keep searching," Carson said, but they both knew he was lying. "Right now, you need medical attention. Possible hypothermia, certainly exposure. I'm calling for an ambulance." "No," Mia said. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're wet, you're injured, and you're in shock." "Then get me some dry clothes and coffee. I'm not leaving. Not while Isabella is still out there." "Miss Martinez, those things have her. Or they know where she is, and I'm going to find her." Carson studied her face, then sighed. "You can't go back into the forest. I won't allow it. You're lucky you made it out alive. So you do believe me. I believe something happened to you. Something that scared you badly enough that you jumped off a cliff rather than face it. That's reason enough to keep you out of those woods." Mia wanted to argue, but exhaustion hit her like a physical blow. Her legs trembled. Her vision swam. Maybe Carson was right. Maybe she did need medical attention. "There's a motel in town," the ranger continued. "Clean, quiet, has hot water. Get some rest. Get checked out by a doctor in the morning. Then we'll figure out next steps, okay?" She nodded, too tired to protest further. Carson gave her directions to the motel, made her promise to see a doctor, and watched from the station doorway as she got in her car. The drive into town took 20 minutes on dark, winding roads. Mia kept checking her rearview mirror, half expecting to see those creatures following, but there was nothing. Just darkness and trees and the occasional reflective gleam of animal eyes. The motel was exactly as described. Clean, quiet, anonymous. Mia locked herself in her room, wedged a chair under the door handle, and stood under a hot shower until the water ran cold. When she finally looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the person staring back. Hollow eyes, scratched face, hair matted with leaves and mud. She looked like someone who'd seen something impossible. Sleep wouldn't come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those creatures, heard that grinding, stone-like voice, felt the cold certainty of being marked for death. At 3 a.m, she gave up and pulled out her laptop. The motel had surprisingly good Wi-Fi. Mia searched for information about Thornwood National Park, indigenous legends, disappearances. What she found made her blood run cold. 23 people had vanished in Thornwood over the past 40 years. Not all at once, never more than 1 or 2 per year, but consistent. Some were hikers, some campers, some park employees. All were in remote areas. None were ever found. The indigenous Salish people who originally inhabited the region had called the forest Xwemelchesten, roughly translated as the place where the old ones walk. Their legends spoke of guardians created by the earth itself to protect sacred ground from invasion, wooden sentinels who walked the deep forest, who could not be killed or reasoned with, who took trespassers and absorbed them into the forest itself. Christian missionaries in the 1880s had dismissed these stories as primitive superstition, but their journals, scanned and uploaded to a historical archive, contained disturbing accounts. Priests who ventured too deep into the forest reported being followed by demons of wood and stone. Several never returned. One who did make it back was found wandering, raving about trees that walked and creatures that spoke with the voices of earth and wind. He died in an asylum 3 months later. In 1952, a logging company tried to clear-cut a section of what was now the park. 20 workers went into the forest. 12 came back. They all told the same story. The trees fought back. Branches grabbed saws and broke them. Roots tripped workers, sending them into ravines. And at night they heard footsteps circling their camp, saw shapes moving through the darkness. The foreman described them as men made of the forest itself. The company abandoned the operation and never went back. Mia found photos from that era. Logging equipment left to rust where it fell. A bulldozer that had struck a massive cedar and somehow gotten its blade wedged so deeply in the wood it couldn't be extracted. And tree trunks bearing deep vertical gouges in sets of 4. The same markings she'd seen today. Her phone buzzed with a text message. She'd gotten a new phone from a 24-hour convenience store, having lost her old one in the rapids. The message was from an unknown number. Stop searching. Isabella is gone. The forest always keeps what it takes. If you return, you join her. Mia's hands shook as she typed, "Who is this?" The response came immediately. "A warning. The only one you'll get." She tried calling the number, but it went straight to a generic voicemail. She reported it to Carson via text, but his response was quick and dismissive. Probably a prank. Someone heard about the search. Try to get some rest. But Mia knew better. That message had come from someone who knew. Someone who understood what was in those woods and what it was capable of. As dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of gray and pink, Mia made her decision. Everyone else had given up on Isabella. The official search was being scaled back due to budget constraints and resource limitations. Code for, "We've looked everywhere and found nothing." Isabella's mother was making arrangements for a memorial service. The police had no leads, no evidence, no bodies. But Mia had seen the camera. That meant Isabella had been alive long enough to be taken, to have her possessions claimed as trophies. Maybe, possibly, she was still alive somewhere in that forest, trapped, hidden, waiting for rescue that would never come, unless Mia went back. She spent the morning at a camping supply store buying proper equipment, a heavy-duty backpack, water purification tablets, a real compass, a headlamp, a fixed blade knife with a 7-inch blade, fire-starting equipment, and, despite the store clerk's raised eyebrows, a hatchet with a carbon steel head. "Planning to clear your own trail?" the clerk asked. "Something like that," Mia replied. She also bought a handheld GPS unit, the kind that worked via satellite and couldn't be jammed by local interference, and a personal locator beacon, a device that, when activated, would send out an emergency signal to rescue services via satellite, providing exact coordinates. Her final stop was a hunting supply store, where she purchased industrial-strength bear spray, 3 cans, and a high-powered flashlight capable of producing 3,000 lumens, the kind used for search and rescue operations. "You need a permit for backcountry camping," the store owner warned. "And you shouldn't go alone. Forest this time of year can be dangerous." "I know," Mia said. "I'll be careful." She arrived back at the trailhead at 2 in the afternoon. Carson's truck was there, along with 2 park ranger vehicles. As Mia got out of her car, Carson emerged from the ranger station, his expression hard. "I can't let you do this," he said. "You can't stop me. I can deny you a backcountry permit, make it illegal for you to enter restricted areas. So arrest me after I come back." Mia shouldered her new backpack. "I'm going, Carson, with or without permission." The ranger studied her for a long moment. Finally, he sighed. "You're going to get yourself killed." "Maybe, but I won't abandon my friend without trying everything I can." Carson reached into his truck and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. He unwrapped it to reveal a flare gun and 4 flares. "Official Park Service equipment. If you get in trouble, fire one of these. We'll see it and come running." "Why are you helping me?" "Because..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Because 20 years ago, my little brother went into those woods on a solo hiking trip. We found his campsite, his tent, all his equipment, but never him. And I've always wondered if I could have done more, pushed harder, gone deeper. So maybe I'm helping you, or maybe I'm helping me. Either way, take the flares." Mia accepted them, tucking the gun into her belt and the spare flares into her pack. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just come back alive. And if you see something impossible, don't try to fight it, just run." "I'll remember that." She started down the trail. Behind her, she heard Carson say quietly, "I'll keep watch on the radio frequency, channel 12. If you can get a signal, call out. Someone will be listening." The afternoon sun filtered through the canopy as Mia retraced her path from the previous day. The forest looked different in better light, still imposing, still dense, but not quite as malevolent. Birds sang in the branches. Squirrels chattered warnings at her passage. Normal forest sounds, suggesting she was still in the safe zone. She found the place where Isabella's footprints ended, marked now with crime scene tape Carson's team had left. From there, she followed her memory back to the circle of marked trees. The gouges were still there, deep and deliberate. But in daylight, she could see more details. Symbols carved into the bark above each set of claw marks, angular shapes that hurt to look at directly, that seemed to shift and writhe at the edge of her vision. Ward signs, maybe. Warnings. Keep out. Sacred ground. Trespassers will be absorbed. Mia moved deeper, counting her steps, marking her path with small piles of bright orange surveyor's tape tied to branches. The cairns were easier to find in daylight. She photographed each one with her new phone, making sure to capture the bone arrangements and strange geometries of the stone spirals. At the 7th cairn, she found something new. A boot. A woman's hiking boot, size 7, dirty and worn. The same brand Isabella wore. Mia's heart clenched. She picked it up, turned it over. Dark stains marked the interior, blood that had soaked into the leather. A sound made her freeze. Footsteps, but not the heavy, scraping steps of the creatures. These were lighter, more human. Mia spun around, hand dropping to the bear spray on her belt. A woman stood between 2 trees about 20 feet away. She wore hiking clothes that were torn and filthy. Her hair hung in matted tangles around a face that was pale and hollow-cheeked. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days. She looked exactly like Isabella. "Bella?" Mia's voice came out as a whisper. "Is that really you?" The woman, Isabella, swayed slightly, as if standing required enormous effort. When she spoke, her voice was rough, painful. "Mia, how are you here?" Mia ran to her friend, catching her as Isabella's legs gave out. Up close, the damage was more apparent. Scratches covered Isabella's arms and face. Her jacket was torn in multiple places. Her eyes were unfocused, pupils dilated, but she was alive. "I came looking for you," Mia said, supporting Isabella's weight. "Everyone thinks you're dead. What happened? Where have you been?" "The Guardians," Isabella gasped. "They took me, kept me in a place. Underground, I think. Or maybe inside a tree, I couldn't tell. Everything was wood and stone and darkness. They said I violated their forest, that I captured their sacred places with my camera, that I had to be absorbed, become part of the forest forever. But you escaped? I don't know. I remember them doing something, some kind of ritual, binding me with vines, pressing stones against my skin. But then I was just walking through the forest, And I saw you. Isabella looked up at Mia with desperate eyes. We have to get out of here. We have to run before they find us. Can you walk? I have water, food. No time. Isabella grabbed Mia's arm with surprising strength. They'll know I'm gone. They'll come for us. Please, Mia. We have to move now. They started back toward the trail, Isabella leaning heavily on Mia's shoulder. But something felt wrong. The forest was too quiet again. The birds had stopped singing. Even the wind had died. How did you escape? Mia asked. If they had you bound, I don't remember, Isabella said quickly. Does it matter? I'm here now. Let's just get out. It matters because you still have both boots, Mia said quietly, stopping. But I found one of your boots back at the cairn. So how are you wearing two? Isabella pulled away from her, and in that moment, everything about her changed. Her expression shifted, became cold and alien. Her body seemed to blur at the edges, her form becoming less substantial, more suggestive of something mimicking human shape, rather than actually being human. Clever, the thing wearing Isabella's appearance said. Most don't notice. Most want to believe so badly they never question. Mia stumbled backward, hand closing around the bear spray. What are you? Where's the real Isabella? Gone, the creature said simply. Absorbed. Her body feeds the trees now. Her memories feed the forest. But her form... The false Isabella smiled, and the expression was all wrong, too wide, too predatory. Her form is useful. You love her. You came here for her. You would do anything to save her. That makes you vulnerable. That makes you easy to lead into the deep places where the guardians wait. The forest around them erupted with movement. Creatures emerged from behind trees, from beneath piles of leaves, from holes in the earth itself, the same wooden, stone-faced things Mia had seen before, but more of them now. Dozens, all converging on her position. Mia pulled the bear spray and aimed at the nearest creature. This time, when she pressed the trigger, it worked. A stream of capsaicin erupted from the canister, hitting the wooden figure directly in what passed for its face. The creature recoiled, but not in pain, in anger. The spray did nothing to it. No eyes to burn, no respiratory system to overwhelm. The capsaicin ran harmlessly down bark that had weathered far worse than pepper spray. Run! The false Isabella's voice followed her, now containing that grinding, stone-like quality. Run and join the forest. Become one with the earth. Your bones will mark the sacred places. Your spirit will feed the roots. Mia ran. She abandoned caution, abandoned her marked trail, abandoned everything but the desperate need to escape. Behind her, the creatures gave chase. Their footsteps shook the ground. Their voices, dozens of them now, chanted in that terrible grinding language. Words that sounded like rocks crushing together, like wood splitting, like wind through caves that had never seen light. She pulled the GPS from her belt as she ran, trying to find her location, plot a route back to the trailhead. But the screen showed nothing but static, the signal jammed or blocked by something in the forest itself. A root caught her foot. Mia went down hard, the GPS unit flying from her hand. She heard it crack against a rock, saw the screen go dark. Behind her, the footsteps grew closer. She grabbed a tree branch and pulled herself up, kept running. Her lungs burned, her legs screamed in protest. This was impossible. Humans weren't built for sustained flight through dense forest. The creatures made of the forest itself would never tire. She burst through a wall of vegetation and nearly screamed. She'd come full circle, back to the ravine where she'd jumped yesterday. The same cliff edge, the same 30-foot drop to rocks and rushing water below. The creatures emerged from the trees, forming a semicircle that cut off any escape. The false Isabella stood among them, still wearing her friend's face like a mask. You should have stayed away, it said. The forest gave you a chance, but you came back. You always come back. That's what makes you so easy to harvest. Mia's hand found the flare gun on her belt. She pulled it free, aimed at the nearest creature, and fired. The flare struck the wooden figure in the chest, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then the phosphorus ignited the dry wood, and flame erupted. The creature staggered backward, trying to beat out the fire, but it spread rapidly. Flames jumped to nearby branches to other creatures. In seconds, half a dozen of the guardians were ablaze. But they didn't die. They burned, but they didn't fall. Instead, they stood in the flames, their empty eye sockets fixed on Mia, their forms gradually consumed, but their presence somehow remaining. The fire revealed something terrible. Inside each burning creature, Mia glimpsed human shapes. Skeletons wrapped in wood and vine, absorbed into the forest but never fully gone, trapped in an eternal merging with the entity that had taken them. One of the burning creatures opened its mouth and a woman's voice emerged, cracked and desperate. "Run, while you can." Isabella. The real Isabella, bound within one of these things, still conscious, still aware, trapped in a nightmare fusion of human and forest. "Bella!" Mia screamed. "I'll get you out, But the flames died as suddenly as they'd started, snuffed out by some force Mia couldn't see. The creatures stood scorched but intact, their wooden forms blackened but still functional. And Isabella's voice was gone, if it had ever really been there. "The forest cannot be burned," the false Isabella said. "The forest cannot be cut. The forest cannot be killed. The forest simply is, and will always be. And now, the forest claims you." The creatures moved forward as one. Mia had nowhere to go but down. She jumped again. This time she knew to aim for the deeper water. The cold was just as shocking, the current just as strong, but she was ready for it. She let it carry her downstream, away from the creatures, away from those burning, trapped shapes that had once been people. The water eventually deposited her on a rocky shore, maybe a quarter-mile from where she'd jumped. Mia dragged herself onto dry land, coughing up water, shaking with cold and terror and grief. Isabella was gone. Not dead, which might have been better, but absorbed, trapped, part of those things now. Conscious enough to know what had happened to her, but powerless to escape, a fate worse than death. And Mia had failed to save her. She lay there as night fell, too exhausted to move, too broken to care. The forest around her was quiet again. The creatures hadn't followed past the ravine. Maybe they couldn't. Maybe their power was limited to certain territories, certain sacred grounds. Or maybe they just knew she'd be back. Eventually, cold forced her to move. She stumbled through the darkness, using her flashlight to navigate, until she found a trail marker, the Blackwater Creek Trail, heading south toward the parking lot. She followed it mechanically, one foot in front of the other, barely aware of her surroundings. It took 4 hours to reach the trailhead. Carson's truck was still there, lights on, the ranger himself sitting in the cab monitoring a radio. He jumped out when he saw her emerge from the darkness. "Jesus Christ," he breathed, taking in her appearance. "I heard the flare, tried to send a team, but..." "Don't," Mia said. "Don't send anyone else into those woods, ever." "Did you find her? Did you find Isabella?" Mia nodded slowly. "I found her. But I can't bring her back." She told Carson everything, all of it. The false Isabella, the revelation of human shapes trapped within the creatures, the voice that might have been her friend's. When she finished, the ranger was silent for a long time. "I'm sorry," he finally said. "I'm so goddamn sorry." "Close the forest," Mia said. "That area where she disappeared. Close it permanently, call it environmental protection or endangered species or whatever. But don't let anyone else go there." "I'll try. But people will go anyway. They always do. That's what happened to my brother. What happened to all the others. The forest calls them in and they go and they never come back." He looked at her closely. "What are you going to do?" Mia didn't answer. She got in her car, started the engine, and drove away from Thornwood National Park. She drove through the night, putting miles between herself and that cursed forest, but knowing distance didn't really matter. She'd been marked, just like the others. The forest had touched her, studied her, let her escape twice. But next time, and there would be a next time, she knew with cold certainty, it wouldn't let her go. Some part of her would always be in those woods. Some part of her was already being absorbed, whether she returned physically or not. She felt it in the way trees now seemed to watch her wherever she went, in the way wood grain patterns seemed to form faces when she wasn't looking directly at them, in the dreams that came every night, dreams of walking through endless forests, of becoming part of something ancient and inexorable and hungry. 3 weeks later, Mia sat in her Phoenix apartment, staring at a news article on her laptop. Another hiker had vanished in Thornwood National Park. A man, this time experienced outdoorsman, disappeared without a trace in the Blackwater Creek area. The search had been called off after 2 days. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. The forest remembers. The forest waits. Return and complete your absorption. Or stay and slowly become ours from a distance. Either way, you belong to us now. Mia looked at her hands. For just a moment, in the reflection of her laptop screen, her fingers had looked like twigs. Thin, wooden, wrong. She closed her eyes and tried not to think about how much she wanted to go back, how the forest was calling her, how part of her, a growing part, wanted to answer. Hope you felt real chills. If you appreciate genuine horror, consider following. Which moment scared you most? Tentar novamente. Claude pode cometer erros. Confira sempre as respostas. The manila folder hit Sarah's kitchen table with a sound that seemed too loud for such a thin collection of papers. 3 days. Tyler had been missing for 3 days, and the ranger at Blackwood National Park had handed her this folder, with eyes that wouldn't quite meet hers. Standard missing persons protocol, he'd said, but his voice had carried something else. Something like resignation. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened it, her coffee growing cold beside her. The morning light streaming through her Seattle apartment windows felt obscene in its normalcy. Somewhere out there, in 600,000 acres of wilderness, her younger brother was lost, hurt, maybe dying. And she was sitting here looking at paperwork. The first page was Tyler's case file. 26 years old, last seen on the Widow's Peak Trail 3 days ago. His car found at the trailhead, keys still in the ignition. His day pack discovered 2 miles in, neatly placed beside a fallen log as if he'd simply set it down and walked away. No signs of struggle. No blood. No body. Sarah flipped to the next page and felt her breath catch. David Morrison. Age 31. Disappeared July 2019. Last seen on Widow's Peak Trail. Backpack found, neatly placed beside a stream. Jennifer Chen. Age 28. Disappeared October 2018. Last seen on Widow's Peak Trail. Belongings found, carefully arranged on a boulder. The list went on. 8 names total over the past 4 years, all in the same remote section of Blackwood National Park. All on or near the Widow's Peak Trail. All with their belongings found intact, positioned with an eerie deliberateness that made Sarah's skin crawl. She grabbed her phone and called Ranger Mitchell's direct line. He answered on the first ring, as if he'd been expecting her call. "Why didn't you tell me about the others?" Sarah's voice came out harder than she intended, a long pause. "Ma'am, I'm not supposed to—" 8 people, Mitchell. 8 people have vanished in the same area where my brother was hiking. Don't give me protocol. Give me the truth. Another pause, longer this time. She could hear him breathing, could almost feel him weighing his words. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because we don't have any answers. We've had search and rescue teams, cadaver dogs, infrared helicopters. It's like they just stop existing. And the locals, they don't go up there anymore, haven't for years. What do the locals say? You don't want to know? Mitchell, they say the mountain takes people, that there are voices in the woods, that if you hear someone calling your name, you don't follow it because it's not really them. He cleared his throat. Look, I've been a ranger for 15 years. I've seen people lost, injured, dead. This is different. Every instinct I have tells me that place is wrong. Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach. Tyler's been gone 3 days. The first 48 hours are critical for... I know the statistics, Ms. Patterson. That's why I'm telling you this. If you're thinking of going up there yourself, don't. We have teams. Your teams haven't found anyone in 4 years. Sarah was already moving, pulling her hiking boots from the closet. How long until someone's been missing do you call off the active search? Silence. How long, Mitchell? 72 hours. After that, it becomes a recovery operation. Sarah looked at the clock. 68 hours since Tyler's car had been found. She had 4 hours before they gave up looking for him alive. I'll be there by nightfall, she said, and ended the call before he could protest. The drive to Blackwood National Park took 6 hours, winding through increasingly remote stretches of highway until the road became gravel and the cell signal disappeared entirely. Sarah's Jeep climbed higher into the Cascade Mountains, and with each mile the trees grew denser, darker, pressing in on both sides like walls. She'd tried calling Mitchell twice more, but her phone showed no service. Just as well. He would have tried to talk her out of this, and nothing he said would have changed her mind. Tyler was her responsibility. Their parents had died in a car accident when Sarah was 23 and Tyler was 19, and she'd promised herself, that she'd look after him. She wasn't about to break that promise because some superstitious locals thought the woods were haunted. The visitor center appeared around a bend just as the sun began its descent toward the peaks. Sarah parked and grabbed her pack from the back seat, mentally reviewing the supplies she'd thrown together in her hurried departure. Headlamp, extra batteries, first aid kit, water purification tablets, emergency blanket, compass, GPS unit, protein bars, rope. Everything she'd need for a quick search and rescue. Mitchell met her at the center doors, his face grim. You shouldn't be here. Where's the trailhead? Sarah. Where's the trailhead, Mitchell? He studied her for a long moment, then sighed and pulled out a topographical map. Widow's Peak Trail starts here. He pointed to a spot on the map. Tyler's pack was found here about 2 miles in. That's where the official search has been concentrated. And the others? Where were their things found? Mitchell hesitated, then traced a circle on the map with his finger. The locations formed a rough pattern, all within a 2-mile radius, all in a dense section of old-growth forest. Here. But Sarah, listen to me. The trail is marked, but once you get into this section, compasses don't work right. GPS signals fade. The terrain plays tricks on you. Even experienced hikers get disoriented. I have 70 hours of solo hiking experience, Sarah said, though her certification felt suddenly inadequate. This isn't about experience. Mitchell lowered his voice. Last year, we sent a team of 5 rangers into that area. They had radios, GPS, everything. They were supposed to be gone for 6 hours. They came back after 3 days, and none of them could explain where they'd been. 2 of them quit the next week. One still wakes up screaming. Sarah felt her resolve waver just for a second. Then she thought of Tyler, of his easy laugh and his terrible jokes, of the way he'd held her hand at their parents' funeral and whispered that everything would be okay. I have to try. Mitchell studied her face, then nodded slowly. You won't make it to the search area before dark. There's a campground about a mile in. Stay there tonight. Start fresh in the morning. You need to survive long enough to help your brother. His voice was firm. Trust me on this. You do not want to be in those woods after dark, not without preparation. Sarah wanted to argue, but the sun was already touching the peaks, painting the sky in shades of amber and blood. And there was something in Mitchell's eyes, genuine fear, that made her pause. First light, she agreed. I'll head out at first light. There's one more thing. Mitchell pulled something from his pocket, a small recording device. This was found with Jennifer Chen's belongings. The battery was dead, but we got it working. I want you to listen to it before you go up there. He pressed play. At first, there was only static. Then the sound of footsteps on a forest trail, slightly breathless. Jennifer's voice came through, young and excited. Day 3 of my solo hike in Blackwood. The views up here are absolutely incredible. I can see why they call it Widow's Peak. The rock formation looks like... She stopped mid-sentence. The footsteps stopped too. Hello? Her voice had changed, become uncertain. Is someone there? Silence, except for the whisper of wind through trees. Tyler? She said suddenly. Tyler, is that you? Sarah felt ice flood her veins. Tyler? But that was 2018. Tyler didn't come here until... Wait, Mitchell said quietly. Jennifer's voice continued, more excited now. Oh my God, Tyler, I can't believe you're here. I thought you were still in Seattle. A pause. What? I can't hear you. Can you come closer? The sound of movement, footsteps leaving the trail. Tyler, wait, where are you going? More movement, faster now, almost running. Jennifer's breath coming in gasps. This isn't funny. Tyler, slow down. Then, suddenly, other voices. Dozens of them, all speaking at once, overlapping until they became a cacophony of sound. Some were crying, some were laughing, some were screaming. And underneath it all, like a bass note holding everything together, was a sound that might have been words, or might have been something far worse. Jennifer's scream cut through everything else, high and desperate and terrified. Then silence. Then, very quietly, a voice that might have been Jennifer or might have been something wearing her voice like a mask. It knows your name. It knows all our names. The recording ended. Sarah realized she was gripping the edge of Mitchell's desk hard enough that her knuckles had gone white. What was that? That's what waits up there. Mitchell took the recorder back. Every person who's disappeared, their last known communication mentions seeing someone they know, someone who shouldn't be there. They always follow the voice, and then we never hear from them again. Tyler doesn't know Jennifer Chen. No, Mitchell agreed. But something up there knew both their names. Sarah felt her determination crack just slightly. Tyler had been alone for 3 days with whatever that was. You're still sending search teams out? Every morning until the 72-hour mark. After that, he didn't finish the sentence. I'm going up there tomorrow. I know. I can see it in your eyes. Mitchell pulled out a satellite phone from his desk drawer. Take this. It doesn't always work up there, but sometimes you can get a signal. Check in every 3 hours. And Sarah? He waited until she met his eyes. If you hear someone calling your name, especially if it's Tyler's voice, don't follow it. No matter what it says, no matter how real it sounds. Sarah took the phone, its weight somehow heavier than it should have been. What if it really is Tyler? It won't be. The campground sat in a small clearing a mile up the trail, empty except for Sarah's tent and the remnants of someone else's fire ring from months or years before. She'd hiked in as the last light faded, and now she sat beside her own small fire trying to eat a protein bar that tasted like sawdust and fear. The forest around her was too quiet. That was the first thing she noticed. No birds, no insects, no small animals rustling through the undergrowth. Just the wind moving through the branches above, creating a sound like whispered conversations in a language she couldn't quite understand. Sarah pulled out her brother's photo from her jacket pocket, studying it by firelight. Tyler at his college graduation, grinning like an idiot, his arm thrown around her shoulders. He'd been so proud of his forestry degree, so excited to explore the wilderness. That degree was supposed to have made him safe out here, supposed to have given him the skills to survive. Clearly, it hadn't been enough. Her satellite phone buzzed. A text from Mitchell. Remember, 3-hour check-ins. First one at midnight. Don't go off trail after dark. Sarah typed back a confirmation and checked her watch. 9:47 p.m. 2 hours and 13 minutes until her first check-in. She should sleep. Tomorrow would be brutal, hiking through dense forest, searching for any sign of Tyler while avoiding whatever had taken the others. But every time she closed her eyes, she heard that recording. Jennifer's voice calling Tyler's name. The chorus of voices that followed. That final scream, Around her, the darkness pressed close, broken only by her small fire. Sarah added another piece of wood and watched the flames devour it, sending sparks spiraling up toward the canopy. Through the branches, she could see stars appearing one by one, cold and distant. A branch snapped somewhere in the darkness beyond her fire's reach. Sarah's hand went to the bear spray on her belt. Hello? Silence. Another snap, closer this time, deliberate, measured, the sound of something, or someone, moving through the forest with purpose. I have bear spray, Sarah called out, her voice steadier than she felt. Identify yourself. The footsteps stopped. In the sudden silence, Sarah became aware of her own heartbeat. Too fast, too loud. She stood slowly, keeping her fire between herself and the darkness, her hand tight on the bear spray canister. Mitchell, if that's you, this isn't funny. No response, but now she could hear breathing, low and rhythmic, coming from multiple directions at once, as if the forest itself had learned to breathe. Then, very quietly, a voice drifted out of the darkness. Sarah. Her blood turned to ice. She knew that voice. She'd known it since she was 5 years old, since the day her baby brother had said his first word. Tyler? Sarah, I need help. Tyler's voice, definitely Tyler's voice, coming from somewhere beyond the edge of the firelight. I'm hurt. I can't make it back on my own. Every instinct Sarah had screamed at her to run toward that voice, to find her brother, to bring him home. Her feet actually moved forward a step before Mitchell's warning echoed in her mind. If you hear someone calling your name, don't follow it. But what if it really was Tyler? What if he was out there, injured, calling for her, and she ignored him? Tyler, come toward the fire, let me see you. I can't. My leg is broken, please, Sarah. Please don't leave me out here. The voice was perfect. Not just the words, but the tone, the cadence, the slight crack on the word, please, that Tyler had always gotten when he was genuinely scared. Sarah's hand loosened on the bear spray. Where are you? I'll come to you. No. The word came sharp and panicked. Stay in the light. Something's wrong with this place. There are others out here. I keep seeing people, but when I get close, they're not right. Sarah's hand tightened on the bear spray again. What do you mean, not right? Their faces. They smile, but their eyes don't move. And they all want me to follow them deeper into the forest. Sarah, I'm scared. I don't know how much longer I can hide from them. Tell me something only Tyler would know. Sarah kept her voice calm, conversational, even as terror clawed at her throat. A pause. Too long. What do you mean? Sarah, I'm hurt. I need... Mom's last words. What were Mom's last words before the accident? Silence from the darkness. Then slowly the breathing sounds multiplied. 2 voices became 4, became 8, became dozens, all breathing in unison, all hidden just beyond the firelight's reach. When Tyler's voice came again, it was different. Still his voice, but with something underneath it. Something that made her skin crawl. She said, I love you. That's what she said. No, Sarah whispered. She said, pick up eggs on the way home. Those were her last words. Mundane and stupid and heartbreaking because we never thought they'd be the last. The breathing sound stopped. Then the voice came again, but this time it wasn't just Tyler's voice. It was Jennifer Chen's voice layered over Tyler's, layered over voices Sarah didn't recognize. Dozens of them speaking in perfect unison. We know your name, Sarah. We know all the names. Come into the dark. Come and find what you're looking for. Come and never leave. Sarah grabbed a burning branch from the fire and held it up like a torch. In its light, she could see shapes moving between the trees. Human-shaped, but wrong. Their movements too fluid, too coordinated, like puppets controlled by a single hand. There were dozens of them, maybe hundreds, forming a circle around her camp, none of them quite stepping into the light. And they were all smiling. Sarah, they whispered together. Sarah, Sarah. Sarah. She backed toward her tent, keeping the burning branch extended. The shapes moved with her, maintaining their distance, their smiles never wavering. In the flickering firelight, she caught glimpses of faces, some fresh, some decomposed, some that looked like they'd been in the forest for decades. Her satellite phone buzzed. The shapes paused, their heads tilting in unison toward the sound. Sarah grabbed the phone, her hands shaking so badly she almost dropped it. A text from Mitchell. Checking in early. Heard from one of the search teams. They're evacuating. Something happened. Get out of there now. She didn't need to be told twice. Sarah grabbed her pack, abandoning her tent, and started down the trail at a run, using her burning branch to light the way. Behind her, she could hear the sounds of pursuit. Not running, but walking, always walking. A steady procession following her down the mountain. The trail twisted through the darkness, tree roots reaching up to snag her feet. Sarah fell twice, skinning her palms on rocks, but she kept moving, kept running, even when her lungs burned and her legs screamed for rest. The voices followed her, calling her name, calling her back, promising her they knew where Tyler was, promising they could take her to him, promising everything if she'd just stop running and turn around. Sarah didn't stop. She didn't turn around. She ran until she saw the lights of the visitor center, until she burst through the doors and collapsed on the floor, gasping. Mitchell was there in seconds, lifting her up, checking her for injuries. Are you hurt? Sarah, are you hurt? They're in the woods. Sarah couldn't stop shaking. They're all in the woods. All the missing people. They're still there, but they're not. They're not themselves anymore. Mitchell's face went pale. You saw them. They knew my name. They knew Tyler's name. They tried to get me to follow them. Sarah grabbed his arm. Mitchell, Tyler's been up there for 3 days. If they have him, if he's become one of those things. We don't know that, Mitchell said, but his voice carried no conviction. Sarah pulled out the map he'd given her earlier, spreading it on the nearest desk. Where exactly was Tyler's pack found? Show me the exact spot. Mitchell hesitated, then pointed to a location on the map. Here. About 2 miles up, just off the trail near a rock formation locals call the Widow's Crown. And the others? Mitchell marked the spots. They formed a pattern, Sarah realized. Not random at all, but arranged in a rough circle, with the Widow's Crown at the center. What's special about that location? Sarah asked. Nothing. It's just forest, rocks, trees. Same as anywhere else in the park. Then why there? Why do they all disappear in that exact area? Sarah traced the circle with her finger. There has to be something, some reason whatever they are, and they congregate there. Mitchell opened his mouth to respond, then stopped. His radio crackled to life, a panicked voice cutting through the static. Base, this is Search Team 4. We found something. We need immediate backup. Mitchell grabbed the radio. This is Base. What did you find? Christ, Mitchell, you need to see this. We're at the Widow's Crown. There's a clearing we never saw before. It shouldn't be here. None of our maps show it. Are you in danger? A pause filled with static and heavy breathing. We don't know. There are structures made of branches and bones. And in the middle, there's a pit. We can hear voices coming from it. Hundreds of voices. Sarah felt her blood run cold. Tyler. They might have Tyler. Mitchell was already moving, gathering equipment. Search Team 4. Hold your position. Do not approach the pit. We're coming to you. Sir, there's something else. We found belongings, fresh ones, a wallet. ID says Tyler Patterson. Sarah was on her feet instantly. He's alive. Tyler's still alive. We don't know that, Mitchell warned, but he was already handing her a radio and a headlamp. Against every regulation and instinct I have, I'm going to let you come with me. But you follow my orders exactly. The moment things go wrong, you run. Understood? Sarah nodded, already pulling on her pack. One more thing. Mitchell's expression was grim. Whatever we find up there, whatever those things are, they're not your brother. No matter what they look like or sound like, remember that. They left the visitor center at a run, 4 rangers plus Sarah, all armed with bright LED lights and radios, and a grim determination that felt more like desperation. The trail up to the Widow's Crown would normally take 2 hours. They made it in 45 minutes, running when the trail allowed, climbing when it didn't. The voices started about halfway up. At first, they were distant, like echoes of conversation carried on the wind. But as the team climbed higher, the voices grew clearer, more distinct. Sarah could pick out individual words now. Individual pleas. Help me. I'm lost. Where am I? Why won't anyone answer? And underneath them all, that same bass note she'd heard on Jennifer's recording, a sound that was somehow both music and nausea, rhythm and wrongness. Search Team 4 was waiting for them at the Widow's Crown. 4 rangers clustered together, their flashlights trained on a gap in the trees that definitely hadn't been on the map. Mitchell had been right. None of the satellite imagery showed a clearing here. But there it was, impossible and undeniable. A perfectly circular space in the forest where no trees grew. We didn't go in, one of the rangers said, a woman in her 30s with wild eyes. We could see enough from here. Mitchell, what the hell is that place? Sarah pushed forward before Mitchell could stop her, her headlamp cutting through the darkness of the clearing. What she saw made her stomach lurch. The structures were exactly as described. Intricate constructions made from branches, bones, and what looked like clothing, all woven together in patterns that hurt to look at directly. They circled the clearing like standing stones, each one taller than a person, each one decorated with personal items, watches, glasses, wedding rings, driver's licenses. And in the center of the clearing was the pit. It wasn't large, maybe 15 feet across, but it was deep, so deep that Sarah's headlamp beam couldn't find the bottom. The voices were coming from down there, echoing up from somewhere far below, a chorus of the lost and confused and terrified. And somewhere in that chorus, Sarah heard her brother. Tyler! She started forward before Mitchell could grab her arm. Sarah, don't... I can hear him, he's down there. She fought against Mitchell's grip, but he was stronger. Let me go, he's right there. Listen to yourself. Mitchell shook her hard enough that her headlamp beam swung wildly. That's exactly what they want. They want you to jump in. They want you to join the others. Sarah froze. Because he was right. Tyler's voice was down there. But so were dozens of others, all calling out names, all begging for help, all trying to lure someone, anyone, into the darkness with them. Then how do we get him out? Sarah's voice broke. Mitchell, he's been down there for 3 days if he's still alive. I need rope. Mitchell barked to his team. All of it. And lights. We're setting up a perimeter. As the rangers moved to obey, Sarah approached the nearest structure. Up close, she could see that the bones weren't just animal bones. Human femurs, skulls, rib cages, all arranged with care, all woven through with clothing and personal effects. One item caught her eye, a college ID badge, faded but still readable. Jennifer Chen, forestry major. The same bright smile from her driver's license photo. Sarah's hand shook as she reached out to touch it. The moment her fingers made contact, the voices in the pit changed. The confused calls became something else, a wail of triumph, of hunger, of recognition. She touched it. The voices screamed together. She touched it. She touched it. She's ours now. She's part of us. She can't leave. She can never leave. Sarah jerked her hand back, but it was too late. The structures were moving now, their branch and bone bodies unfolding, rising, reaching for her with appendages that were both human and not. Run. Mitchell's voice cut through the chaos. But Sarah was already running back toward the tree line, back toward the rangers and the lights. Behind her, she could hear the structures collapsing, their components separating and reforming into individual shapes that pursued her with terrible purpose. The human-shaped things emerged from the forest on all sides, dozens of them, their faces frozen in rictus grins, their movements jerking and unnatural. They had names, Sarah realized with horror. She could see name tags still pinned to some of them, IDs hanging from chains around their necks. Jennifer Chen, David Morrison. Names from the list Mitchell had given her, missing hikers from years past. And at the front of the group, moving faster than the others, was Tyler. Or something that looked like Tyler. Same brown hair, same green eyes, same weathered hiking jacket he'd been wearing when he disappeared. But his smile was wrong, too wide, too fixed, and his eyes didn't blink. "Sarah," Tyler's voice came from that wrong mouth. "You came for me, I knew you would, you always keep your promises." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. "Tyler, please. If you're in there, if any part of you is still you, fight it. Come back." "I am back." Tyler took a step closer and the other shapes moved with him, a coordinated advance. "I'm home, and you can be home too. We're all home here. We're all together. Forever." Mitchell raised his gun, but Sarah grabbed his arm. "Don't, please. That's my brother." "That's not your brother anymore," Mitchell said quietly. "Sarah, I'm sorry, but Tyler's gone." "No." Sarah stepped forward, her hands raised. "Tyler, I know you're scared. I know this thing has you. But you're strong. You're stronger than this. Remember Mom and Dad? Remember what Dad used to say?" Tyler tilted his head, the movement too far, too insect-like. "What did Dad say?" "We're Pattersons. We don't give up." Sarah was sobbing now, but she kept talking. "You didn't give up when Mom and Dad died. You finished school. You got your degree. You fought through every bad day, every nightmare. This is just another bad day, Tyler. Just another nightmare. You can fight through this too." For a moment, just a moment, something flickered in Tyler's eyes. Something human. Something terrified. "Sarah." His voice was different now, younger, genuinely confused. "Sarah, where am I? I can't. There are so many voices, they won't stop talking. They're inside my head and they won't stop." Then the moment passed. Tyler's face smoothed over, becoming that too wide smile again. "Nice try, sister. But we're not Tyler anymore. We're not anyone anymore. We're everyone. We're all the lost ones. All the ones who wandered too far. All the ones who heard the voices and followed them down. And now you'll join us." The shapes surged forward. Mitchell's gun fired 3 times, the shots impossibly loud in the mountain air. The shapes didn't even slow down. Bullets passed through them like they were made of mist, and they just kept coming, reaching with too many hands, calling with too many voices. The Rangers scattered, running in different directions. Sarah heard someone screaming, maybe her, maybe one of the Rangers, as the shapes closed in. Then a hand grabbed her arm, solid and real and human. "Mitchell." "The pit! That's where they come from. We have to seal it." "How?" "I don't know, but we figure it out or we all end up like your brother." They ran, Mitchell pulling Sarah behind him, back toward the clearing, back toward that impossible pit that shouldn't exist. The shapes followed, but slowly, as if they weren't really trying to catch them. As if they knew that Sarah and Mitchell had nowhere else to go. At the edge of the pit, Mitchell dropped to his knees, shining his light down into the darkness. "There's something down there. A structure of some kind. Can you see it?" Sarah looked. Far below, barely visible, she could make out shapes that might have been wooden beams, might have been the framework of something larger. And wrapped around those beams were bodies. Dozens of bodies. Hundreds maybe, all intertwined, all moving slowly, all calling out with voices that echoed up the shaft. "They're not dead," Sarah whispered in horror. "They're still alive down there." "Not alive, not exactly." Mitchell was pulling something from his pack. Flares, emergency road flares from the Ranger vehicles. But not dead either, caught in between, feeding whatever this thing is. "Tyler's down there." "I know." Mitchell met her eyes. "Sarah, I'm sorry, but I have to try to stop this." He lit the first flare, its red light harsh and chemical in the darkness. The voices in the pit screamed. The shapes that had been advancing on them stopped, their movements becoming agitated, desperate. "No," they cried in unison. "You can't. We need them. We need to grow. We need to become." Mitchell threw the flare into the pit. For a moment, nothing happened. Then light exploded from below, bright and terrible and wrong. The bodies in the pit caught fire, but they didn't burn cleanly. They burned with flames that were purple and green and colors that shouldn't exist. Flames that screamed and raged and seemed to consume more than just flesh. The shapes around the clearing shrieked. They rushed forward, but not toward Sarah and Mitchell. Toward the pit, trying to reach it, trying to extinguish the flames. But as they got close to the edge, they simply dissolved, their forms unraveling like smoke in wind. Tyler's shape was the last to go. He stood at the edge of the clearing, his wrong smile finally fading, his eyes meeting Sarah's one last time. "Thank you," he said, and his voice was his own again. "I'm sorry. I love you." Then he was gone, dissolving into nothing, leaving only the memory of who he'd been. Sarah collapsed, her knees hitting the dirt, sobs tearing from her throat. Mitchell's arm came around her shoulders, holding her up as the clearing filled with fire and light and the final screams of the lost souls being released from their eternal torment. When the flames finally died, there was nothing left. The pit was gone. The structures were gone. Even the clearing itself seemed to be fading, the trees at the edges beginning to creep inward, reclaiming the space that had been stolen from them. "Come on," Mitchell said gently. "We need to go before this place disappears completely." Sarah let him help her up, let him guide her back down the trail. Behind them, she could hear the forest settling, returning to normal. Birds began to sing. Insects resumed their chirping. The terrible silence that had hung over the mountain was lifting. But Tyler was still gone. They all were. Jennifer Chen, David Morrison, all the names on Mitchell's list, all the souls that had been trapped in that pit. Sarah had freed them, but she hadn't saved them. There was no saving them. There had never been any saving them. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood in the Seattle cemetery where her parents were buried. The funeral had been small, closed casket because there had been no body to bury. Just an empty box and a headstone that read, "Tyler Patterson, beloved son and brother, lost but not forgotten." Mitchell had helped with the arrangements, had filled out all the paperwork declaring Tyler legally dead. The official report said he'd fallen into an unmapped ravine, that his body was unrecoverable. No mention of pits or voices or shapes in the darkness. Some truths were too terrible to be official. The national park had been closed indefinitely. A sinkhole, they told the press. Unstable geology. Too dangerous for hikers. Mitchell had been reassigned. The other rangers who'd been there that night had transferred out, scattered to parks across the country, trying to forget what they'd seen. But Sarah remembered. She would always remember. She placed flowers on Tyler's grave, not the fresh ones from the funeral home, but wildflowers she'd picked herself, the kind Tyler used to collect on his hikes. She thought about adding something personal, something meaningful, but the words wouldn't come. In the end, she simply whispered, "I kept my promise. I found you. I'm sorry I couldn't bring you home." The wind rustled through the cemetery trees, and for just a moment, Sarah thought she heard her name being called. But when she turned, there was nothing there. Just the wind. Just the trees. Just the memory of a voice that would haunt her forever. She walked away from the grave, got into her car, and drove home through the city streets as the sun set behind her. Life would go on. It had to. But some part of her would always be in those woods, listening to the voices, searching for her brother among the lost souls. That night, Sarah dreamed of the forest. She dreamed of walking through trees that whispered her name, of finding a pit that no longer existed, of hearing voices calling from far below. In the dream, Tyler stood at the edge of the pit, his smile genuine now, his eyes clear. "It's not your fault," he said. "You did what you could. You freed us." That was enough. "Was it?" Sarah asked in the dream. "Were you really you at the end? Or were you just something pretending to be you?" Tyler smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "Does it matter? You believed I was me. That's what counted. That's what gave me the strength to let go." Sarah woke with tears on her face and the certainty that wherever Tyler was now, he was finally at rest. Not home. There was no coming home from what had happened in those woods, but at rest. Free from the voices, free from the pit, free from the collective of lost souls that had tried to make him one of them forever. It would have to be enough. Outside her window, the Seattle night was alive with normal sounds. Traffic, sirens, the distant hum of the city. Sarah lay in bed and listened to them, grateful for each mundane noise, each reminder that she was here, alive, safe. But sometimes, in the quiet moments between sounds, she thought she heard whispers. Thought she heard her name being called from very far away, and she wondered if part of her was still there, in those woods, still searching, still hoping, still lost. If this story gave you chills, follow for more quality terror. Could you survive in Sarah's place?